Hey guys, tonight we begin a journey back in time, not to search for kings or warriors, but to listen to the way people used to sleep. These were people who lived more than 2,000 years ago, without phones, without nightlights, without 9-to-5 schedules. And yet, they had nights deeper than any most of us have ever known. They did not just sleep. They stepped into the dark as if it were a sacred ritual. And tonight, so will you. But before we turn off the lights, take a second to hit subscribe if this feels worth listening to. Leave me a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is there right now. I always find it magical to connect with others who are awake in the same moment, even if we're oceans apart. Now dim the lights. Turn on a fan if you like a soft background hum. And together, let us quietly slide into the dark. Hypnos is waiting. Your day ends in light. The glow of your laptop screen, the kitchen light, the cold white shine of your phone in your hand. You scroll through a few videos, check your email, maybe even respond to a work message at 11 o'clock at night. Your eyes are strained, your mind is spinning, and you call it exhaustion. But perhaps it is a warning that you have denied an ancient god. Hypnos, the Greek god of sleep, does not dwell in light. He sleeps in a pitch-black cave, hidden deep beneath the earth, where not a single ray of light can reach. The entrance is always shut, surrounded by fields of poppies, resting roots, and the silent river Lethe, which carries away all memory and wakefulness. Hypnos appears only when darkness fully falls and the world is completely still. The ancient Greeks believed that to be embraced by Hypnos, you had to enter his realm, no light, no sound, no worry about tomorrow. It is not that he despises you. He simply cannot find you among the LED lights. A boy named Cleon, who lived in Thebes in the 4th century, before the Common Era, understood this early on. His father taught him that before sleeping each night, he must extinguish every oil lamp. Draw the heavy curtains, lie still, and listen. Listen for what? Listen for Hypnos to arrive. On some nights, the boy would see him in dreams, a young man with flowing black hair, soft wings stretching from his temples, drifting like a cool mist. Whenever Cleon slept well, he would learn philosophy faster the next day, remembering Plato's words as easily as drinking water. But on the mornings after he stayed up late, playing games in the fields, his head throbbed like it had been struck with a hammer. His father would only shake his head and say, "Hypnos does not like the light." We laugh at stories like that today. We believe we have outgrown the dark ages of superstition, living with light 24 hours a day in modern bedrooms, with sleep trackers and meditation apps. But modern science now shows Hypnos was right. Melatonin, the hormone that governs sleep, is only released when light vanishes entirely. The human body, even yours with the latest iPhone, is still an ancient machine programmed to understand night as a signal to rest. Artificial light tricks the brain into thinking it is still daytime, so the brain does not release melatonin and you lie awake. Research published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism shows that just 30 minutes of exposure to LED light before sleep can delay your internal clock by 90 minutes. That means you lie down at 11, but your body thinks it is only 9:30, and Hypnos waits for no one. At the temple of Asclepion, where ancient Greeks sought healing through dreams, the sick were led into a dark room for 3 days and nights. No light, no speech. They lay in the shadows, ate little, and waited for the god to arrive. Many later awoke with a vision, a prophecy or a guiding image, and some claimed they were healed. Today we call it sleep therapy, darkness retreat, or blue light detox. But the Greeks did it 2,000 years before us. Imagine this. You are lying in a 5-star hotel room with dimmed lights, the television off, the curtains drawn, and still you cannot sleep. Meanwhile, a Greek warrior sleeps soundly in the Arcadian mountains on a bed of straw, his head resting on his helmet. The difference is not comfort. It is your relationship with the dark. You fear it. They believed in it. Modern people suffer from a kind of photophobia in sleep, fear of darkness, fear of silence, fear of losing control. So you turn on a nightlight, play a background podcast, loop white noise to lull yourself. But Hypnos does not arrive while you still hold the reins. He comes only when you let go. Entirely. There is a small statue discovered on the island of Delos, depicting Hypnos cradling a child in his arms. There is no torch, no light, only complete silence. Some scholars believe it is a symbol of surrender, that sleep is the purest act of trust. Trust that your body knows how to heal itself. Trust that there is another realm beyond wakefulness, where Hypnos stands guard. And if you truly wish to meet him, you must learn how to turn off the light. Not just the one on the ceiling, but also the ones inside your mind. Expectations, schedules, deadlines, resentments. All of them glow, and they dim the shadow of the ancient god. You are not losing sleep. You are losing Hypnos. And he is not angry with you. He is merely waiting on the other side of the dark. You think of sleep as a continuous stretch. It begins at 11 o'clock and ends at 7. A straight, unbroken line. Your doctor, your health app, and your work schedule all agree. So when you wake up at 3 in the morning, you panic. Do I have a sleep disorder, you wonder? What you do not realize is that you have just entered the most sacred hour in the ancient culture of sleep. Cleon, the young man from Thebes you met earlier, often awoke in the middle of the night. Not from nightmares. He would sit up, pull on a wool cloak, light a small oil lamp, and unroll a scroll of philosophical notes. The night was quiet. The mind was light. No marketplace noise, no nagging from his mother about marriage. In the silence, he wrote, "The immortal soul is the only thing that never sleeps." His father never stopped him. In their home, they had a name for that hour, Mesoniktikon, the middle of the night. The ancient Greeks did not see it as an interruption, but a ritual. Sleep was divided into 2 parts, the first for resting the body, the second for resting the soul. The time in between was a gateway between worlds. Today, historians call it biphasic sleep, segmented sleep. And it was not just the Greeks, the Romans, medieval Europeans, ancient Japanese. They all used to sleep in 2 phases. The evidence is found in texts where terms like first sleep and second sleep appear without explanation, as if everyone understood. No one was worried about waking up at midnight. They wrote letters, composed poetry, made love, meditated, prayed, and then went back to sleep. Modern science does not deny this. In fact, a study from the University of Virginia found that without artificial schedules or electric lighting, Humans do not naturally sleep a straight 8 hours. In natural conditions, volunteers instinctively adopted a two-phase pattern, an initial sleep of 3 to 4 hours, 1 to 2 hours of wakefulness, followed by a second sleep. During that waking period, brain waves did not resemble the anxious patterns of insomnia. Quite the opposite. They mirrored deep meditation, the alpha state, where imagination and perception are at their sharpest. Hypnos. The god of sleep is not a gatekeeper of uninterrupted slumber. He is the night watchman, and each time you wake, if you know how you may find him, not in dreams, but in that delicate space between sleeps, where time slows, where messages stop, where you hear your own voice. In Athens, there is a record of an orator named Thesippos, who always wrote his speeches around 2 o'clock in the morning. "The night divides me in two," he wrote. "In the first half I sleep. In the second I am born." Today, waking in the night is labeled a disorder. You take sleeping pills. You play podcasts. You do everything you can to make sleep run like an unbroken software loop. But humans are not machines. You are an ancient biological being born into nature designed to dance with darkness like a partner. And the Greeks knew this. In the space between sleeps, they spoke in hushed voices. They avoided heavy tasks. They stayed indoors unless necessary. That time was sacred to the daimonion, the personal spirit. Socrates once said, "It is at night when I am awake and alone that the daimonion whispers to me." That was not madness, it was profound inner dialogue. Perhaps you have felt it, a sudden idea at 3 in the morning, a memory from childhood drifting in like the scent of wild grass, a gentle sadness that needs no reason. But you dismissed it, reached for your phone, sought noise to lull yourself. You killed your sacred hour without even knowing. Segmented sleep is not merely a biological habit. It is a philosophy of life to allow the body its rhythm and the soul its space. The ancient Greeks did not worry because they knew Hypnos does not dislike those who wake at night. He only dislikes those who do not know they are awake. So, if you find yourself waking at 2:47 in the morning, do not scramble to fall back asleep. Do not turn on the lights. And do not open Instagram. Lie still. Eyes half closed. Listen to your heartbeat. Imagine Cleon writing down Plato's words, Thesippos listening for his daimonion, and Hypnos still silent all around you, waiting for you to know the way back. You are not losing sleep. You are rediscovering a rhythm once shared by all of humanity, and perhaps the truest one of all. You were taught that sleep must be soft. The bedroom must be quiet. The mattress must be plush, and the pillow must be as smooth as clouds. Advertisements are filled with floating beds in forests, gentle meditation music, and a woman sleeping like an angel beneath a cashmere blanket. But the ancient Greeks would be astonished. They did not sleep that way. And strangely, they were healthier than you. In the small brick home of Xenia, a female physician living in the region of Thessaly, the bed was nothing more than a rough wooden frame topped with a thin mattress woven from goat wool. Her pillow was stuffed with straw, and sometimes it was just a stone wrapped in cloth. Xenia believed that the less contact one had with softness, the more the body retained its strength. She never slept on thick cushions because Hypnos does not dwell in warmth. It may sound harsh, but ancient Greek philosophy taught that sleep was part of self-discipline, like eating, like physical training. Not for indulgence, but for restoration and control. The Stoics, from Seneca to Epictetus, viewed sleep simply as a lesson in restraint. They slept little, slept straight-backed, and slept in modest places to remind themselves that they did not live for comfort, but to prepare for adversity. A military scholar named Callistratus once recalled that in Athenian soldier camps, each man was given just a blanket and a log to rest his head. "He who cannot sleep among sand and stone," he wrote, "will not stand firm among sword and blood." From early on, sleep was already a test of both body and spirit. Today you are told to invest thousands of dollars in orthopedic mattresses, memory foam pillows, air purifiers, essential oil diffusers, and even sleep robots. But your body still, the body of a prehistoric being, does not understand such technology. Your spine does not need softness. It needs alignment. Your organs do not crave silk. They need circulation. Excessive comfort at times is the most subtle trap for your health. A study from Harvard University once revealed sleeping on a slightly firm surface, lying on the left side with a low pillow, improves blood circulation, reduces pressure on the spine, and increases deep sleep quality. That is exactly how the ancient Greeks slept, not because they read the study, but because they lived in harmony with the nature of their own bodies. Imagine this: in the night, upon a cold stone floor, Xenia lies on her side beside a flickering oil lamp. Outside, wind rustles the olive trees. Inside, she places a hand on her abdomen, following her slow breath. No noise, no foam mattress, no sleep assist program. And she wakes before dawn with no back pain, needing no coffee. And you lie on the world's most advanced mattress in a bedroom where humidity and temperature are controlled by artificial intelligence. And you are still tired. Perhaps you have misunderstood relaxation, because sometimes too much comfort does not restore you. It only weakens you over time. Ancient Greek philosophy teaches we need not avoid hardship, we must learn to grow stronger. Sleep is no exception. Discomfort is not the problem. The problem is our dependency on comfort. Sleep is not a reward. It is a silent test. Each night, can you truly let go? Some spend their entire lives chasing soft sleep and never find hypnos. But hypnos does not favor softness. He favors those who dare to sleep on stone and still dream of fields. Tonight, when you lie down, try removing one layer of blanket. Lower your pillow just a little. Do not turn on white noise, and do not try to sleep softly as in the advertisements. Sleep like the Greeks, simple, unadorned, but with the belief that sleep is a teacher, not a servant. Because in the end, Hypnos does not love you because you sleep softly. He loves you when you sleep truly. There is something you have not heard in years. Not someone's voice, not a song or a conversation, but the sound of the night. When the lights go out, when the entire city falls silent, you are supposed to hear something. The rustling wind slipping between roof tiles, the sigh of an old wooden wall, the steady slowing of your heartbeat in your chest. But you hear nothing, because before that moment, you had already filled the space with the hum of air conditioners, the traffic from the street, the background music, the unconscious ads on YouTube. And your ears, like doors left always open, have gone numb, no longer able to recognize the fragile voice of the night. The ancient Greeks did not live this way. In a seaside village on the island of Naxos, there was an astronomer named Thales. He pitched a tent on a high rock cliff to watch the stars, not for the wide sky, but for the absolute quiet. He once wrote, "When I listen to the universe at night, questions no longer need answers." That was not poetry. It was diagnosis that night with its most delicate sounds is the original state of healing. No soundproof glass, no noise-canceling headphones. The ancient Greeks listened to real sound, the clatter of seashells on the shore, the distant bellow of oxen on a mountain slope, the lullaby of wind of leaves of dying fire. To them, sound was not a tool to avoid silence, but the very fabric of silence itself. A recent study from the University of Pennsylvania found that sleeping in an environment with white noise, sound machines' artificial wind may help you fall asleep faster, but it also leads to lighter sleep, more chaotic dreams, and makes it harder for the brain to reach its deepest delta state. Meanwhile, sleeping in true natural silence, not manufactured, boosts activity in the hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for memory and emotional processing. You think silence means the absence of sound, but in truth, silence is the state in which sound no longer disorients you. In ancient Athens, there was a practice of calling the 11th hour around midnight the hour of the ear. It was believed that by then the body had stilled, the mind had released its grip, and the ears, still open, could hear sounds from beyond the waking world. Some heard the call of hypnos. Others heard the answer to questions they never knew they were asking. Today, you wake in the middle of the night because of a car horn, or the sound of the washing machine downstairs, or your own brain generating noise. You reach for your phone, open YouTube, search for simulated rain. But you do not fall back asleep because your body does not need artificial rain. It needs a world that does not need any sound at all. Silence is a kind of medicine, and the Greeks treated it as ritual. Xenia, the physician from Thessaly, before sleep would soak her feet in warm water and sit alone on the porch. No prayers, no conversation. She simply sat, hand on her abdomen, eyes on the hills. The night was not pitch black, but quiet enough to hear herself alive. And once she slept, no one could wake her before sunrise. The sound of the night is not for those who fear themselves. It is for those who dare to enter the silence as a journey. No map, no guide, only the wind. And you. You do not need more lullabies. You just need to reclaim your ears. Tonight, before sleep, turn off every device. Sit alone in the dark just 5 minutes. No podcasts, no soft music, no advice. Just listen. You might feel discomfort, as if something is rising from within your chest. A breath, a memory, a long-forgotten feeling. Do not smother it with more sound. Let it drift, because that is where sleep begins. The ancient Greeks did not need silence to sleep. They needed it to remember who they were. And you are quiet enough for hypnos to call your name. You wake from a strange dream. A winding road along a cliffside, an old friend long gone, a phrase like a secret code. You shake your head quickly, reach for your phone, scroll through notifications, and forget the dream like a jacket left behind at a gas station. Just the brain cleaning out data, you tell yourself. And you have just missed a conversation with the divine. In the world of the ancient Greeks, a dream was never just a dream. It was the whisper of Morpheus, the god of dream images, son of Hypnos. When hypnos guides you beyond the threshold of waking, it is Morpheus who weaves the images, the memories, the messages. Not by accident, not by whim. Each dream is a letter. At the temple of Asclepion, the famous healing sanctuary in Epidaurus, patients were given no medicine. Instead, they were required to bathe fast and enter the abaton, the dream chamber, a dark room where they would lie for 3 nights, waiting for the god Asclepius to appear in their dreams. The healer was not a doctor, it was the dream, and upon waking they would recount it to the priest, who would translate it into a treatment. A man named Lycos, a merchant from Delphi, once came there paralyzed in the legs after a long journey. In his dream, he walked through a field where his father, dead since Lycos was 8, stood silently and reached out to place a hand on his knee. The next morning, Lycos could walk again. Modern medicine might call it the placebo effect. The ancient Greeks called it a real encounter. We live in an age of pride. We analyze dreams with MRI scans, map them to neural trauma, even build AI to decode them. But the more we do, the farther we stray from the essential truth. Dreams are the software of the soul. They are not meant to be dissected. They are meant to be heard. Hypnos lulls you to sleep, but it is Morpheus who takes you farther. In the dream cartography of the ancient Greeks, there are 3 paths, one through a gate of ivory leading to false dreams, one through a gate of horn leading to prophetic dreams, and one from the arm of Morpheus, where images become so real you can touch the sorrow. Why do you discard these things each morning? Why do you treat dreams like glitches in a system like side effects? Perhaps because you do not want to believe that something exists outside your control, even yourself in sleep. The Greeks did not separate dreams from life. Some national decisions, like the campaigns of Alexander the Great, were made after receiving divine signs in dreams. Poets like Pindar believed their verses were delivered in sleep, and every child was taught to raise the memory of a dream as you would raise a lamb gently, patiently, without forcing. One time, Cleon the boy from earlier stories dreamed he wandered into a vast cave. Inside was a well, and beneath it, a man reading a book by a blue flame. He told his philosophy teacher the next day and was advised to record each night's visions. One day, the teacher said, "A dream will teach you what no book ever can." Today, you dream too. But you wake with a jolt, check your email, sip your coffee, and let the dream dissolve in caffeine. You remember nothing. You lose Morpheus like a former lover without a number. Not because he did not come, but because you did not wait. Dreams are a realm with their own laws. No one may enter without respect. No one may understand by treating them as data mines. You must live with them, sleep with them, and each morning sit quietly like the Greeks to write them down, sketch them out, or simply remember. Tonight, if Morpheus comes, will you listen? Or will you wake, unlock your phone, and let that dream drift away like a letter never read? You are not lacking in dreams. You are lacking in reverence, and Hypnos whispers every night. You do not have a sleep disorder. You have simply stopped believing that dreams are real. You are lying in bed. The screen of your phone glows with a cold blue light. Your fingers scroll unconsciously through a flood of news wildfires, the death of a celebrity, a dancing dog video, and an ad for an AI-powered mattress. Your eyes ache. Your brain feels like a twisted wire pulled too tight. You put the phone down and say, "Time to sleep." But hypnos does not come to those who have just swallowed the world through a screen. The ancient Greeks knew nothing of doom scrolling, but they understood the danger of letting the soul go to sleep covered in dust. To them, sleep was not a mechanical process, it was a sacred rite. You did not simply lie down, you entered a divine realm. And to be granted passage through that gate, you had to be cleansed. In a small village at the foot of Mount Parnassus, there lived a midwife named Irene. Before sleeping, she performed a slow sequence of gestures, washing her hands in herbal water, burning a bit of myrrh resin, and sitting cross-legged gazing into a small flame. No speaking, no thinking. Just a brief meeting with herself after a long day spent between birth and death. No one rushed her to bed. There was no alarm clock. But when her body felt as light as smoke, she knew hypnos was near. The Greeks believed the state before sleep hypnagogia was a fragile threshold between the physical world and the dream world. It was a moment when the mind opened ready to receive signals from within, or to be poisoned by the last images you saw. If you fall asleep right after reading a furious email or watching a report of tragedy, your dream will no longer be a place of healing, but a battlefield. Outside the temples of Asclepion, there were always basins of water for purification. Visitors were required to wash their faces, hands and feet, not just to cleanse the dust, but to rinse away tension, restlessness, and attachment to the ego. You cannot bring your drama-laden self to meet the god of sleep. Hypnos receives only those who arrive with empty hands. Instead of doom scrolling, the Greeks prepared for sleep, as if preparing for a sacred meeting. They kept handwritten journals. They anointed themselves with soft oils. They read poetry not to analyze but to loosen the mind from logic. Some told stories to themselves as if soothing the child within with gentle memories. Today, you wear a smartwatch to measure your sleep quality. But it does not measure the quality of the self you carry into sleep. You bring with you stress, news, fears, expectations, and unresolved noise. You do not sleep deeply, not because your body is not tired, but because your mind has not yet rested. And hypnos does not come to those still working. Irene once said, "I must be washed of today so that tomorrow has space to enter." It was not just water, it was a decision to leave the world outside the door of night. You may not have oil lamps or myrrh, but you have the choice. Turn off the phone early. Sit quietly for 5 minutes. Watch the fading light of day. Place a hand on your chest. Breathe in, breathe out. Do not let sleep be a collapse, but a crossing. Modern scientists call it sleep hygiene. But the word hygiene comes from Hygeia, the Greek goddess of health, daughter of Asclepius. The Greeks did not see it as medical advice. They saw it as sacred ritual, a bridge between human and divine made of small, deliberate acts. If you have never slept as if summoned to a sacred place, perhaps you have never truly slept. And if tonight you wish for hypnos to come, do not seek him in the endless news feeds. Seek him in a quiet breath, in a gentle scent, in the glow of a fading candle, in yourself when you are still enough to return. You step into your child's room at 9 o'clock in the evening. The nightlight glows softly. A stuffed animal rests at the head of the bed, and the white noise machine hums in the corner. Your child's eyes remain open. "I'm scared of the dark," they say. You smile, stroke their hair, and promise morning will come soon. But you do not realize that in that very moment, a quiet farewell has occurred between the child and their chance to befriend the night. In the world of ancient Greece, children were not taught to avoid darkness, they were taught to understand it. Not through soothing reassurances, but through stories. The night was not an enemy. The night was where Hypnos dwelled. It was when the gods visited. It was when the soul learned to listen to itself. In a seaside home in Attica, a boy named Demetrios was often told stories by his grandmother before sleep. Not happy-ending fairy tales, but excerpts from Homer. A warrior sleeping on the battlefield, cloaked in nothing but his mantle back resting against his shield, dreaming of a land no one remembered. That night, Demetrios was not afraid of the dark. He crawled under the blanket, pretending to be a warrior. And he dreamed of meeting Dionysus, the god of wine, of ecstasy, of dreams. Dionysus handed him a small cup of wine. In the morning, Demetrios told no one, but he knew he had grown just a little older. To the children of ancient Greece, sleep was not the end of the day. It was a journey, and the dark was not a hiding place for monsters, but a stage upon which the soul could perform. They were told of Hypnos, the god of sleep, with wings of feathers on his temples, as light as breath. Of Nyx, the goddess of the night, mother of Hypnos, born from chaos, who moved without sound. She was not fierce. She was deep, and children knew how to listen to depth. In the ancient Greek system of education, children were taught the concept of eusychia, the health of the soul. And a healthy soul does not avoid emotions, even fear. If your child is afraid of the dark, it is not something to be corrected, but something to be explored. The Greeks did not turn on lights. They told stories. They asked, "What do you see in the night?" And then they listened without interruption. They taught children the language of fear so that the child could name it, and from there, speak to it. Today, we unintentionally teach children that sleep is an obligation, a command from a parent, a condition to earn iPad time tomorrow. But children do not learn through orders. They learn through emotion, through symbol. And sleep is the only moment in the day when a child can access their inner life, the very inner life you as an adult are now trying to recover after years of forgetting. In ancient Greek temples, there were chambers reserved for children to sleep overnight during seasonal rituals. They lay side by side under the light of torches, listening to stories, then one by one, slipping into sleep. That night, no two dreams were alike. But in the morning, when they told their dreams, each one was heard as a small prophecy. Modern science affirms what the ancients knew. A child's sleep is foundational to brain development, emotional regulation, and even the shaping of self-concept, the understanding of one's identity. But what science cannot measure is a child's capacity to connect with the dark as a friend. You fear your child will have nightmares. But the Greeks believed even nightmares are messages. They do not need to be banished. They need to be understood. And what helps your child sleep peacefully is not a bunny-shaped nightlight, but your presence in the world of symbols. You do not need to be a healer. You just need to be a storyteller, a hand to guide your child into the dark instead of building a fence of light around it. Tonight, try something different. Turn the lights off early. Sit beside your child. No rushing, no urging, no commands to close your eyes. Ask, "What do you think Hypnos might look like?" And listen. It may be the deepest conversation of the day, because Hypnos comes to those who do not fear the night. And perhaps your child will be the one who leads you back to it. You wake up. Your eyes open in a room bathed in dim light, the artificial glow that never quite turned off from the night before. The phone on your bedside table flickers to life every few minutes. You do not remember your dream. Perhaps you had none. You feel exhausted even though the clock tells you that you slept for 8 full hours. You do not understand why. Perhaps you did not sleep. You simply shut down, like a device gone inactive waiting to power back on. No hypnos, no dreams, no transformation. We, this modern civilization, have treated sleep as an inconvenience, a gap in productivity, something to be reduced, optimized, and if possible replaced with pills. We do not sleep to be reborn. We sleep just enough to return to the cycle. Sleep in the modern mind is no longer sacred. It is a biological obligation. Hypnos, the god of sleep in ancient Greece, has not disappeared, but he has been driven out. He cannot bear artificial light, constant noise, relentless routines, and the arrogance of humans who believe they can control everything, even the deepest states of consciousness. He once lived in a dark cave surrounded by poppies and the river Lethe of forgetfulness. There, those who came to him brought nothing, only their willingness to let go, and he gave them sleep as a gift not for rest, but for reunion with the self. When was the last time you met yourself in sleep? Was it when Cleon rose in the middle of the night to write down a philosophical idea that arrived in the space between dream and waking? Was it when Xenia lay on the cold stone floor and felt her body align with the breath of the mountain? Or was it when Demetrios, the boy who once seemed the most uncertain, smiled in the dark, knowing Dionysus had whispered his name? You do not need to live in ancient Greece to meet Hypnos again. You only need to honor him as your ancestors once did. By turning off the lights at the right time, by putting down your phone when your eyes begin to ache, by stepping into darkness not as a defeated soul, but as a pilgrim. Leave the world outside the door of night. Let your mind be cleansed by silence, by space, by symbols. Let sleep be not just a biological process, but an offering. Because Hypnos does not come to those who lie down out of fatigue. He comes to those who know the night is a gate, not a shelter. Tonight you might still scroll through your phone late into the evening. You might still wake up with no memory of dreams. But if just once you turn off the lights early, sit in stillness, breathe slowly, expect nothing, need nothing, you may hear something, a breath, a fleeting image, a familiar yet distant feeling. Hypnos perhaps has returned, not to make you sleep, but to make you someone who knows how to sleep. You have not lost sleep. You have only forgotten how to enter it as a ritual. And Hypnos still waits. In the dark. A stormy night descended upon the island of Kos. Thunder rolled across the sky like the beating of divine war drums. The sea roared as if it were tearing through the final threads of the world. In the midst of that night, within a small limestone house, a child was born not to lullabies, but to the anguished cries of a dying mother. The child's name was Hippocrates. It is said that as he let out his first cry, the storm outside began to calm. Not because he was a miracle, but because from that moment on, his fate no longer belonged to himself. It belonged to a new era, one in which humankind dared to look death in the eye without fear, without gods. His father was a traditional healer, a man who believed in Asclepius, the god of medicine, worshipped in sacred temples filled with incense and ritual. But Hippocrates did not grow up among altars and holy chants. He grew up in quiet rooms where the groans of the ill drowned out even the most desperate prayers. From a young age, he could not understand why good people still died. He asked his father, "Why did the gods not listen to my mother's prayers?" His father said nothing. That was the first moment Hippocrates began to doubt. Not to doubt faith itself, but the way faith operated. His mother passed away. The healer could not save his own wife. The temple could not save the people. And the world rooted in mysticism began to crack under the gaze of a child. Hippocrates began to observe the human body as if it were a map without names, without a compass, only questions. Why does the pulse quicken when we are afraid? Why does a wound swell before it heals? Why can breath vanish in the morning light? While other children memorized myths, he sought out the carcasses of wild animals to study their insides. When adults knelt before altars, he listened to the coughs echoing in the chests of the sick. While the world searched for miracles, he searched for patterns. At the age of 13, Hippocrates left the island, without a farewell. Carrying only a small satchel, a few parchment scrolls, a tiny dissection knife, and a question carved in charcoal onto a piece of wood. If illness does not come from the gods, then where does it come from? He traveled across Greece, to Egypt, to Athens, to the places where death came most often to learn about life. Hippocrates did not seek knowledge. He sought truth. And truth, as he soon discovered, did not wear white robes nor sit upon the throne of the gods. It was found in the body in pus, in midnight cries. They called him a heretic, a man who dared to open a patient's flesh, not with sacred blades, but with reason. But he did not fear. He had already lost his mother to a system that did not understand what it meant to be human. Everywhere Hippocrates went, he left behind strange notes. Patient number 4, pale skin, slow pulse, strange mood, perhaps due to dehydration. Questions whispered into the future toward a time when medicine would no longer be a matter of belief, but of observation. He placed his hand on the forehead of a fevered patient and felt the heat like a stream beginning to evaporate. He pressed his ear against a sick man's chest and heard the heartbeat like a drum in a distant dungeon. Not to sanctify it, but to say, we can understand our bodies. When a blind man asked, "Can I ever see again?" Hippocrates made no promise of miracles. He replied, "Can you describe what darkness feels like?" And from that answer, he found a way to touch the patient's soul, not just heal his flesh. Hippocrates was an observer, not a prophet. And because of that, he touched something no god ever had faith in the human body. In those old weathered scrolls, he wrote, "Nature is not against us. It is merely waiting for us to understand its language." And then, like a silent revolution, Hippocrates began to redraw the map of life. No gods, no incantations, only principles, laws, and compassion. Once a student asked him, "Master, how do you know when a patient is about to die?" He did not answer with symptoms. He said, "When their eyes look upon you no longer begging for help, but simply seeking peace. Then we must learn not to intervene." Healing is not always about prolonging life. Sometimes it is about restoring dignity. That was the moment Hippocrates ceased to be just a man. He became a principle of living, and so began a journey not to make a saint, but to remind all of humanity. We can heal ourselves if we learn to look within, not with a magnifying glass, but with a deep trust in nature. There are roads from which one never returns. When Hippocrates left the island of Kos, he did not merely leave his homeland. He rejected an entire world, a world where the sick bowed before altars of the gods, where death was a supernatural sentence and survival was a matter of miraculous luck. He departed with only one weapon, a question. That question led him to Athens, a city of light where philosophers debated in open squares and patients visited temples as if on pilgrimage. Hippocrates came not to kneel. He came to observe. He watched the blind feel their way up steps as if darkness had weight. He studied the convulsions of a child burning with fever and asked himself whether this was truly the wrath of Apollo, as the priests claimed, or merely a misfiring of the nervous system yet unnamed. Hippocrates listened with his eyes, saw with his ears, and wrote with his doubts. He spent countless hours in marketplaces, infirmaries, and battlefields recording every pain he witnessed, not to write a book, but to map the invisible patterns of life. He began to see that illness was not a sentence. It was an imbalance between heat and cold, moisture and dryness, stillness and motion. Not punishment, but deviation. From this intuition, Hippocrates began to shape a theory: the human body as a system of fluids, blood, phlegm, yellow, bile, and black bile, each with its own properties and functions, and when thrown out of harmony, illness would arise. But most importantly, he did not sanctify his discovery. He tested. He documented. He questioned. He even corrected himself. While priests taught that epilepsy is possession by a god, Hippocrates quietly studied 50 cases. He discovered that seizures came in cycles, responded to temperature, and sometimes improved after a cold bath. He wrote, "This is not a god. This is the body speaking." That single sentence spread like a hot wind across Athens. Temples closed their doors to him. Those who once called him healer now called him heretic. But Hippocrates did not retaliate. He simply continued to observe, to record, to listen. The boy who had lost his mother to mythology had now become the first man to challenge the sacred structure of ancient Greek medicine. Hippocrates did not reject the gods. He rejected their use as an excuse. When a priest said, "This man suffers as punishment for lying," Hippocrates asked, "Then why did that newborn die having never spoken a word?" It was not blasphemy. It was liberation. He began building a new method not based on prayer, but on clinical observation. He did not heal with holy water, but with warm water. He did not summon spirits, but summoned students. Hippocrates taught them to place a hand upon the patient's abdomen and feel for unnatural swelling, to analyze the color of urine, to listen to coughs, to observe the shade of the skin. Every symptom was recorded like a line of mournful poetry. For he believed the body speaks, if only we know how to listen. In quiet nights beside the sea, Hippocrates wrote, "The body never betrays. It is we who have yet to learn its language." Over time, young people began to gather around him, those who did not wish to be priests or shamans, but to be interpreters of the human body. He taught them to ask a patient, "Did you sleep well last night?" before asking, "Where does it hurt?" For Hippocrates understood that the soul too could make the body ill. And so he gave birth to something the world had never seen: a system for teaching medicine. No incantations, only questions, no temples, only a small room by the sea where young minds took notes, dissected animals, and observed patients as philosophers observe the soul. The world called him a traitor. History calls him a pioneer. One day a woman brought her child and said the boy was possessed. Hippocrates did not send them away. He held the child gently, calmed him with a whisper, then rubbed a mint leaf across his chest. The child fell asleep. No spells, no miracles, only the touch of a human hand on another. The mother knelt to thank him. Hippocrates lifted her up and said, "I do not cure illness. I help the body heal itself." As night fell, he stood before the sea, listened to the waves, then wrote a simple line: "Nature is never in a hurry, but it never forgets anything." Hippocrates did not lead a revolution with a sword. He led it by listening. And that is how he, a student who refused to believe in divine voices, became the first to truly hear the voice of the human body. When Hippocrates returned to the island of Kos, he did not return as a victor. He brought no spoils of war, no glory, no entourage or medals. Only a humble satchel filled with sweat-soaked parchment scrolls, notes on pulse rhythms, urine colors, breaths, coughs, and skin tones. The townspeople looked upon him as if he were a stranger. For centuries, Kos had been a place where priests in white robes walked through incense-laden air, chanting prayers to forgive the sick. But now a man weathered by wind returned quiet, without ceremony, without incantation. Only a gaze sharp as an acupuncture needle. Hippocrates had no desire to build a temple. He wanted to build a place of learning, not a place to teach belief, but a place to teach how to question it. He chose a small hill overlooking the sea. There he built a modest stone house. No altar, no statue of any god, only a sickbed, a wooden table, a few leather-bound shelves, and young minds whose eyes burned not with belief in miracles, but with hunger for reason. The world would come to call it the School of Kos. There Hippocrates did not teach how to cure illness. He taught how to see, how to listen, how to sense, and most importantly, how to write. For he believed what is not written down will die just like the patient. Each day he took his students along the shoreline, observing villagers at work. They were to record everything, even the seemingly unrelated, the smell of soil after rain, the posture of a man with a weary back, the way light struck the forehead of someone with a fever, because to him nothing was unrelated to life. One day a student asked, "Master, how do we know what treatment to give?" Hippocrates did not answer right away. He led the class inside to a patient lying unconscious. He placed his hand on the forehead, bent his ear to the chest, smelled the breath, lifted the eyelid, observed the lips. Then he handed the student a clump of earth and said, "The body is like a field. Sometimes it does not need medicine. It only needs rain." There were no charts, no diagrams, only intuition sharpened by observation. He forbade guessing. If you do not know, say nothing. A physician's guess can kill faster than a blade. And above all, he taught ethics. While others viewed patients as broken flesh, Hippocrates demanded that his students ask for the patient's name first, to record emotions, feelings, fears, because he knew. Some pain does not come from the body. It comes from memory. When a man came to him, skin darkened by sun, hands cold as stone, claiming he was under a curse, Hippocrates did not prescribe medicine. He asked, "What have you lost?" The man broke down in tears. His wife had died in the war. Since then his heart had beaten slowly, as if waiting for a reason to stop. Hippocrates did not write heart disease. He wrote, "A man torn from within." It was the first time Greek medicine had acknowledged the link between emotion and illness. Over time, the reputation of the school of Kos spread beyond the island. Young people came from city-states across the land, Athens, Corinth, Delphi. They did not come to learn magic. They came to learn how to believe in what no one had taught them, that the human body can heal itself if we stop harming it. But not everyone rejoiced. From the temples, criticism rose. Arrogant, godless, a man who challenges the spirits. Hippocrates said nothing in return. But one day a stranger appeared at the classroom door. In his hand, a knife. In his eyes, fire. He shouted, "My mother died because you said she needed no offering. You killed her with your theories." Hippocrates did not run, did not defend himself. He simply stepped forward, placed his own hand upon the one holding the knife as if touching a fever, and said, "I did not kill anyone. I simply refuse to bow before what I do not understand." The man's hand trembled, then dropped the blade, then broke into sobs. The next day Hippocrates lectured on impermanence, that not everyone can be saved, but everyone can be understood, and that matters more than any ritual. From that wind-swept hill, not just a generation of physicians was born, but an entirely new way of seeing the world, not rooted in fear, but in understanding, not beginning with prayer, but with the gentle touch to the wrist and the listening, not to the patient's pulse, but to the pulse of all humanity. Athens, the city of light, was dying in the dark. That summer, a ship arrived from the east. On its deck, sailors lay collapsed eyes, clouded blood trickling from their mouths, bodies covered in black spots. Within a week, the nightmare swept through every neighborhood. A strange illness. No name, no cure, no explanation. People flooded the temple of Athena, praying amid incense smoke and wailing cries. They begged the gods for a miracle, but no miracle came. Only corpses lay scattered across the squares, blood and terror staining the stones. In the chaos, the priests fled. Merchants shuttered their shops. Even the philosophers fell silent. A city that had once stood as the pinnacle of civilization now lay open like a mass grave. And then into that scene, a figure stepped through the gates of Athens, not in armor, not with an entourage, only a satchel of medicine, a few parchment scrolls, and eyes unshaken by fear. Hippocrates had arrived. He did not wait to be summoned. He did not wait to be asked. Upon hearing of the outbreak, he quietly packed his things and left the island of Kos, not because he believed he could save anyone, but because he believed this was the moment for reason to stand firm in the heart of hell. While others fled the city, he walked in, through alleyways, into homes, into rooms where patients gasped in terror. No mask, no protective gear. Only the calm of a man who had looked death in the eye and still believed in life. Hippocrates brought no miracles. He brought a board. He wrote, recorded, observed. He categorized symptoms. Who had fever with diarrhea? Who bled from the nose? Who died within 3 days? Who survived? Gradually, a system emerged, not built on divine will, but on statistics. For the first time in history, humanity studied a plague as a phenomenon governed by patterns. Hippocrates did not cure everyone, but he brought order to panic. He ordered zones to be divided, isolated the symptomatic, boiled water, used clean cloth, directed fresh water toward treatment areas. He sketched diagrams of airflow, understanding that enclosed spaces were silent killers. At first, the people of Athens were skeptical, but then they saw wherever he touched, survival rates rose. Not because he was a miracle worker, but because he was the only one not driven by fear. He told his students, "We do not fight disease with courage. We fight it with knowledge." And at night, he sat beside the sick, writing, listening, writing again. A child lay unconscious, fever burning. The mother pleaded, "Please work a miracle." Hippocrates worked no miracles. He soaked a cloth in cool water, wiped the child's forehead, changed the dressings, kept the body hydrated. After 3 days, the child opened his eyes. The mother burst into tears. No God intervened. Only a pair of human hands, patient and knowing. Gradually, people stopped going to the temple. They went to the temporary clinic Hippocrates had set up. They did not ask for blessings, they asked for instructions. Children who once studied mythology now learned to take temperatures. Worshippers became caretakers, bringing water, washing linens, learning how to help one another survive. Athens began to heal not through salvation, but through collective awareness. One day the governor came to see Hippocrates. He knelt down among the dying and said, "You are no god, but you have done what gods could not." Hippocrates did not accept praise. He simply said, "I did not defeat the plague. I only reminded people that we can understand life if we are willing to listen to it." After many months, as the plague began to wane, Hippocrates prepared to leave. He held no farewell ceremony, left no statue, only a bundle of pages documenting observations, symptom descriptions, sanitation guidelines, models of quarantine. It was the first public health manual in human history. What he wrote would be copied, passed down through centuries, carried across the Middle Ages, translated by Arab physicians, studied by doctors of the Renaissance, and still lives today. Every time a physician opens a chart and asks the first question, "How are you feeling?" No one knows how many lives he saved, but everyone knows. After that plague, Athens was no longer the same. It was no longer a city of idols. It became for the first time a place where humanity stood on its own by the power of science. And at the center of it all stood the figure of an old man, hair silvered by time, walking slowly, always with a pen in one hand and a wet cloth in the other. A man who worked no wonders, but who taught an entire civilization that knowledge is the most beautiful way to love life. When the plague had passed, and the people of Athens began to rebuild their homes and memories, Hippocrates quietly returned to Kos. He brought no trophies, no crown, no title, only sun-darkened skin, calloused hands, and a thick notebook filled with words written in smoke, blood, and sweat. Under the windswept sky of the Aegean Sea, he sat alone beneath the shadow of an ancient olive tree. The years of healing had left him with something that could not be written into theory nor expressed through numbers. He had witnessed the unnamed, the eyes of the dying, the final grasp of a hand, the whispered words between two breaths. And he understood healing was not merely the study of the body, it was the bearing of trust. Trust, the most fragile thing in the human world. A patient lays bare their body, their fears before a stranger. They believe that this person, the one who holds the scalpel, prescribes the medicine, touches them, when no one else dares, to will not betray, will not judge, will not exploit. But Hippocrates knew not everyone would keep that promise. And so in the stillness he began to write. Not a scientific work, but a vow, a constitution without a parliament, a pact between human and human written in ink, quiet yet strong enough to reach the spine. He called it the Oath. It was not long, not complicated, but every word reached into the deepest part of medicine and of human nature. I swear by Apollo Asclepius and all the gods, I will never give poison to anyone, even if asked. I will never use a knife to cause an abortion. I will keep secret all that I see and hear, even after death. No one forced him to write it. No law required anyone to swear, but he knew the greater the knowledge, the deeper the need for conscience. For the greatest power of a physician is not to cure, but to know when not to interfere, when to be silent, when to hold the hand of someone in pain, not to save, but to simply be there. Hippocrates believed a doctor was not a god, but must never become a monster. At the end, he wrote, "I will live my life with purity and reverence. I will not only be a healer, but a guardian of the dignity of life." And then he called his most trusted students to gather around a patient's bedside. They stood in a circle, hands over their hearts, and they read, not loudly, but clearly, not with pomp, but with the hush of wind echoing through a cave. The Hippocratic oath spoken for the first time. No one applauded. No horns sounded. But from that moment, medicine was no longer just a skill. It became a promise. A promise that said, "When you come to me a stranger in your most vulnerable state, I will not betray you. I will not exploit you. I will not act for power, for profit, or pride. I will do only one thing: keep you whole." Across centuries, that oath would be copied, translated into hundreds of languages, adapted, preserved, and spoken aloud at medical graduations around the world. Some would recite it without understanding. Some would swear it and forget. But others in that moment between life and death would remember those simple words and choose rightly. Hippocrates never believed his oath would be immortal. He only believed that if one day he was no longer here, the oath might remain to remind the world, science without conscience is just a sharpened blade. A student once asked him, "Do you believe all doctors will keep this oath?" Hippocrates looked out at the sea where waves crashed on stone like questions with no end. Then he said, "No, but I believe they deserve to be reminded." And that was enough. People may forget his name, may never recall how many lives he saved. But each time a doctor places a stethoscope to a patient's chest, holding silence to listen to the heartbeat, he is still there. Not as a ghost, but as part of humanity's conscience. Some heal with medicine, some with a blade. But Hippocrates, by the end of his life, healed with a gaze, not a divine stare, not hypnosis nor religious faith, but a kind of gaze that only someone who has listened to thousands of final breaths could possess, a look that told the patient, "I see you. I am here. I will not leave." He no longer needed many words. When patients came, he did not ask, "What is wrong?" He asked, "Did you sleep well last night?" Not out of curiosity, but because he understood sleep is one of the first rhythms of a soul in distress. Hippocrates no longer wrote as much. He listened more. A dry cough, a pause between two sentences, a moment of hesitation when someone said, "I am fine." All of it was data. All of it a hidden map beneath the skin. His hands were still steady. When he laid them on the belly of a child with stomach pain, he did not press hard. He rested his hand there like a stone on the surface of a lake so that the unease could rise and then slowly settle. When treating a soldier returned from war, he did not ask about the wound. He asked, "Do you still dream?" And when the man replied, "No, I no longer dream," Hippocrates knew the wound lived in memory. He no longer tried to save everyone. He learned to understand when life wanted to let go. An elderly woman lay unconscious, and the students urged more medicine, more injections. Hippocrates simply shook his head, sat beside her, held her hand, and whispered, "It is all right. You have gone far enough." He believed there are times when the art of healing is the art of letting go. Beneath the old olive tree where his first classroom once stood, now became his clinic. No door, no sign, no barrier between doctor and patient. Only stone wind and compassion. Each day, people brought him their stories. A mother worried her child would not eat. A potter whose chest ached from working too hard. A poet whose hands shook too much to write. Hippocrates did not just treat illness. He treated fear. He taught his students, when a patient comes to you, they bring pain. But hidden beneath it is a greater question. Does my life still have meaning? If you heal only the body, but do not touch that question, you are not yet a physician. Once, a young woman came to him, eyes red from crying. She said, "Master, I think I am going mad. I do not want to eat, do not want to speak. I cry every night and do not know why." He did not prescribe medicine. He did not write a note. He asked, "Have you ever painted?" She nodded. He gave her a palette, some scraps of wood, and said, "Paint the sadness. Then we will talk." Hippocrates never used the word depression, but he had touched modern psychology while the rest of the world still called emotion a demon. When his students asked, "Master, how do you know what a patient needs even when they say nothing?" Hippocrates smiled, placed a hand on his chest, and pointed to his eyes. He said nothing, but they understood empathy does not need words. Each night before sleep, he still wrote a few lines, not for study, but to remember. A patient lost, a failed case, a moment of silence between two souls. Once he wrote, "We never truly know who needs healing, but if we stay long enough, they will tell us." People began calling him the physician of the heart, not because he had magic words, but because he was never in a rush. He once said, "Illness is nature's letter to us. Do not tear it up. Read it carefully." And he lived his whole life as a translator between the physical world and the emotional one. As Greek medicine became increasingly mechanical, as new physicians saw the body as nothing more than a machine, Hippocrates remained a master of simplicity. A hand, a gaze, a shared breath, no tools needed, no promises made, only presence. No palace was ever built in honor of Hippocrates. No victory bore his name. No throne, no coronation, no city-state cast his image in gold. Instead, he left behind something that could not be sold nor stolen: understanding. On an old wooden shelf in a small room by the sea, dozens of parchment scrolls were found, wrapped in linen tied with frayed rope. No ornament, no decoration, only slanted, weather-worn handwriting tilted by sea wind and time. They came to be known as the Corpus Hippocraticum, the Hippocratic collection. Not all of it was written by him. Much came from students, colleagues, successors. But the voice, the breath, the perspective all bore the mark of one man. Inside were notes on how to measure body temperature by hand, how to sense fever with the eyes, how to forecast a patient's fate by the color of the lips, by their voice, by how they turned their head when weary. Some lines were written in the language of science, but others read like poetry. The body is an ocean. Illness is its wave. We cannot stop the wave, but we can learn to swim. Not a single scroll spoke of war weapons or glory. They were all about encounters, between physician and the suffering, between the living and those preparing to leave, between fear and a hand resting on the forehead. Over time, copies were made, from Kos to Athens, from Athens to Alexandria, from Alexandria to Rome, then to Baghdad. Medieval Arab physicians read the words of Hippocrates like scripture. They called him Albucrates, the quiet master. As Europe descended into its dark centuries, people still sought the Greek manuscripts hidden in monasteries and vaults of books like a small flame guarded against the snow. With the Renaissance came scholars like Vesalius Paracelsus and later William Osler, all of whom quoted Hippocrates as a reminder amid all discoveries, inventions, surgeries, machines. There must still be someone who knows how to place a hand on a wrist and remain silent. No one knows when Hippocrates died. There is no confirmed grave, no ashes worshipped, only a legend that when he passed, no burial was held. His notebooks were burned and their ashes scattered into the wind. That wind carried the ink across the world. And ever since, every time a doctor writes a prescription, listens to a heartbeat, or asks a question, they are continuing those notes. One of his students, who later became a renowned physician, once wrote, "I cannot remember all that he taught, but I remember how he looked at the dying as if they still had something to teach us." That legacy does not live in libraries. It lives in a way of thinking. That illness is not an enemy. It is a map. That a patient is not a number. They are a disordered universe, and we are only the guide. That a physician is not above, but the one who kneels before the fragility of life. Even today, the Hippocratic Oath is read at medical graduations, not because the law requires it, but because something in its words reminds us we do not learn to heal just to treat bodies, but to preserve humanity. A modern physician, looking at patients through a screen of monitors, must still remember the eyes are the first diagnostic tool. A hand placed at the right moment can be more powerful than any prescription. And if there is one final thing Hippocrates left behind, it is presence. He once wrote, "When the patient has no more medicine, no more chances, no more time, the physician must do the only thing left: be there. Be there means to be present. Be there means to bear witness. Be there means to never let a human being leave this world in silence." In his final years, Hippocrates no longer tended to many patients. He walked more slowly. His eyes grew dimmer, but his gaze remained unchanged, still deep as the Aegean Sea, still warm as fire in a winter hearth. He lived simply in a small stone house draped with ivy, behind which lay a herb garden, where basil, mint, and perilla grew tangled together as if whispering stories. People still came to see him, not for cures, but to be heard. They spoke of fear of death approaching, of feeling lost inside a body that no longer felt familiar. He did not write prescriptions. He asked only one question: "Is there still something you want to live for?" Not everyone could answer right away. But in that silence, they realized life is not measured by heartbeat, but by longing. And Hippocrates, the man who once laid the foundation for modern medicine, had now become a gatekeeper of meaning. One morning the wind carried the sea's salt and the scent of mugwort through the air. He sat on his familiar wooden chair, holding his old leather-bound notebook, its pages now stuck together with time. On the final page, he wrote a line not for physicians, not for students, but for the world. If one day humankind forgets how to listen to one another, medicine too will turn to stone. And then he stopped writing. He did not die in a gilded bed, not to chance, not before hundreds bowed in farewell. Only a few students, a few former patients, and a door opening to the sea. They say that when he passed, no one wept, not because he was not mourned, but because no one wanted to break the peace he left behind. His body was wrapped in white cloth, simple, just like the first time he placed his hand on a patient's forehead. No tombstone, no inscription, only wind waves and a silence as long as the final breath of a life fully lived. But the strange thing is, after his death, no one felt his absence. On the contrary, it seemed he was everywhere. In a medical classroom in Rome, an old professor spoke of Hippocrates as one speaks of family. In Baghdad, an Arab physician copied his oath onto parchment. In 18th century Paris, a young doctor began his thesis with the line, "I follow no school except Kos." And then in New York, Tokyo, Saigon, Cape Town, wherever a hand is placed upon a patient with respect, that is where Hippocrates lives again. No one remembers exactly how long he lived, only that he lived rightly. And that is a kind of time that cannot be measured. Today, when young doctors read the Hippocratic Oath at their graduation, some are moved to tears, not from pressure, but from the feeling that they are continuing a thread that began with a man not famous, not powerful, but who believed in the human capacity to heal through other humans. If there were one thing he would want to say to our modern age, surrounded by machines, data, and speed, it would be, do not forget, Patients do not need superheroes. They need presence, and perhaps that is the most important oath of all, not just for doctors, but for all of us. In the heart of the Giza Desert, where the wind has blown unceasingly for 4 millennia, where sand covers steps once marked by the divine, stands a monolith, unmoving, unyielding, undaunted. The Great Pyramid of Giza. It is not the oldest building in the world. It is not the most intricate piece of architecture, but it is the only structure from the ancient world that has remained intact for more than 400-500 years. The Egyptians called it Great Khufu. The Greeks called it pyramid. The modern world calls it a wonder, a temple, a tomb, or more simply, a mystery. Because it is not just a triangle of stone. It is a colossal question mark carved in rock. Who built it? Why was it built? And why at the heart of what is considered the greatest tomb of all time has no body ever been found? No mummy, no coffin holding the dead, no gold, no swords, no funerary objects, only stone. Layered on stone, layered on stone, as if someone was trying to carve something into time not to remember, but to never be forgotten. A pyramid that does not speak. Unlike the tombs of later pharaohs, the Pyramid of Khufu bears no inscriptions, no paintings, no signs to tell who lies within. It offers no explanation. It is silent. And in that silence, one hears a whisper echoing from a mind beyond its time. I do not need to be known by name. I only need to stand. It was once believed the pyramid was a tomb, the final resting place of Khufu the pharaoh who lived around 2500 BCE. But when archaeologists unlocked its corridors and reached the chamber called the King's Room, they found only an empty sarcophagus. No body, no treasures, no sign of looting, for there was nothing to loot. So perhaps it was never a tomb at all. Or perhaps it was a tomb so perfectly made no one even realized it was one. A time machine made of stone. More than 2 million blocks of stone, each weighing between 2 and 80 tons, stacked with astonishing precision without cement. Its corners deviate from true north by just 3 arc minutes, a level of accuracy almost unimaginable, even more precise than some modern compasses. Inside the corridors are angled with purpose, some pointing directly at stars in the Orion constellation, believed by the ancient Egyptians to be the path to the heavens for the king's soul. From its shape, its layout to its location, every element suggests this pyramid was not merely meant to hold, but to transform. A machine for immortality, not to preserve the dead, but to surpass death. A tomb that no one dared to lie in. Perhaps Khufu was never buried there. Perhaps he merely ordered its construction to prove one thing, that even if he vanished, that mountain of stone would speak for him. And strangely enough, he was right. Because Khufu remains one of the least known pharaohs in history, surviving only through a single statue less than a hand's length tall. But the shadow he casts over history is greater than any ruler. No one remembers his voice, but all bow their heads before the place where he once dreamed of being laid to rest. A poem in stone, written for eternity. Perhaps the pyramid was never built to house the dead, but to contain a longing to defy physical limits, a longing that even as the body decays, the name fades, the age collapses, there remains one thing that never vanishes shape. A triangular peak, 4 faces pointing skyward, motionless, as if proclaiming without words, "I am here, and I do not die." Giza is not a graveyard. It is the petrified face of pride. At Giza, there are no prayers, only wind, no idols of gods, only the sun casting shadows over stone. And there, in the midst of it all, the Great Pyramid still stands without speech, without explanation, without needing to be understood, only to be seen. And because of that, it has never died. In the valley of the Nile River, when the sun was still believed to be a god, rowing his boat across the sky each day, when people still spoke to the stars, as they would to their ancestors, a strange kind of being emerged. The Pharaoh. Not merely a king, not merely a ruler. The Pharaoh was the embodiment of divinity. In the belief system of ancient Egypt, the Pharaoh was the son of Ra, the sun god, the axis linking heaven and earth, the bridge between the immortal and the mortal. He did not rule by human decree, but by the will of the gods. And thus, the death of a pharaoh was never the end. It was a transformation into another state of existence. When the pharaoh closed his eyes, his soul did not dissolve into nothingness. It began a journey across the night, across the soul plains of Duat, confronting trials, giant serpents, lakes of fire, the scales of justice. Only by overcoming these could the soul rise once more, with the sun becoming a shining star in the western sky. But for that journey to happen, one thing was required: an intact body, a tomb to guide the way, a map so the soul would not be lost. That is why the Egyptians mummified their dead. That is why they built tombs. That is why eventually they raised pyramids. The pyramid was not born of randomness. It was the result of centuries of trial, failure, and faith. From the early flat-roofed mastabas to the step pyramid of Djoser to Sneferu's bent pyramid, every failed attempt was a step closer to eternity. And by the time of Khufu, all physical, astronomical, spiritual, and symbolic elements had reached maturity. He did not merely want a tomb. He wanted a vertical axis piercing the desert, touching the vault of the sky. For in Egyptian cosmology, the world began as a primordial ocean. From it rose a single mound, Benben, the place where the god Atum first appeared, where the first light broke through the chaos. The pyramid, with its pointed peak, was Benben turned to stone, a primeval symbol of life, of light, and of resurrection. It was not architecture. It was religion solidified in stone. And to build such a thing required more than hundreds of thousands of people. It required a collective system of belief. For who would spend their life hauling stones to build a tomb for one man? Only those who believed that man would never die. That each stone they lifted was a step for the king to ascend to heaven. That when the pyramid was complete, the order of the universe would be restored, the crops would flourish, the Nile would rise in season, the sun would rise each morning. The Great Pyramid of Giza, therefore, was not merely the project of a king. It was the living declaration of a civilization, a place that proclaimed death is a journey. The Pharaoh is a celestial body. The desert is a realm of silence, and the pyramid is the eternal image of a faith that needs no explanation. Today, as we stand before Giza and ask, how did they do it? Perhaps the better question is, why did they believe so deeply to give their strength, their lives, even their deaths to a monument not meant for the living. And the answer may be simpler than we expect, because to them life was temporary. But symbols were forever. No one truly knows who Khufu was. All that is known is that he was the second pharaoh of the fourth dynasty, the son of Sneferu, the man who built the first bent pyramid. No writings of Khufu himself remain. No epics, no decrees, no praises. Only a small ivory statue less than 8 centimeters tall, about 3 inches, was unearthed at Abydos Obscure Modest Anonymous. And yet, his name has been forever tied to the greatest construction in human history for more than 4 millennia. Why would a man so faint in the pages of history leave behind such a solid, undeniable mark? The answer does not lie in Khufu himself, but in Khufu's ambition. He did not wish to be remembered in words. He wished to be remembered in stone. And stone does not fade, like paper does not burn, like bamboo does not dissolve like spoken tales. Stone remains. The Greeks later called him Cheops, and they did not like him. In the writings of Herodotus, Khufu is described as a tyrant, an oppressor of the people, one who forced women into prostitution to fund the stones of his tomb. Whether that is true or not, we cannot say. But it tells us one thing: even in ancient times, Khufu was already a symbol of controversy. A man absent from all Egyptian inscriptions, yet unavoidably present in stone. And in that absence, legend was born. People began to ask, did he really exist? Was he truly powerful enough to summon tens of thousands to stack stones in the desert for 20 years? Or was the pyramid itself a metaphor for ultimate vanity? A theory: Khufu did not build a tomb. Khufu built a statement that if one cannot live forever in flesh, then one shall force time to remember through weight. Each block of stone a sentence never written, each ascending step a resistance to death. The question is no longer, what did he bury inside it? But what was he trying to bury that could not be buried? Perhaps it was his name. Perhaps it was fear. Perhaps it was humanity's dream that a man could defy death, not with spirit, but with matter. For thousands of years, the Great Pyramid has stood amid the winds and sands, with no paint remaining, no inscription surviving, no statue more enduring than itself. And in that, Khufu achieved what every other pharaoh failed to do. He needed no one to tell his story. He only needed someone to look up. The world has known Alexander, Caesar, Genghis Khan conquerors who ruled by the sword. Khufu held no sword. Khufu held geometry. He conquered not lands. He conquered oblivion. Perhaps he was lonely. A man who lived in legend building for 20 years, the monument to his own death, not for rest, but for permanence. Perhaps he was greedy, arrogant, and authoritarian. But perhaps he was simply the only one who dared to look death straight in the face, and answer it not with words. If you ever step inside the Great Pyramid, you will witness something strange. There is no golden glow, no statues of gods, no ornaments, not a single inscription. Only stone, dense, cold, heavy, silent. And yet, within that silence, you hear something speaking, because nothing speaks more powerfully than a structure that needs no explanation. The Great Pyramid is not decorated because it is the decoration. It does not simulate the cosmos because it is the fossilized model of the cosmos itself. Its faces align precisely with the 4 cardinal directions. Its corners deviate from true north by a margin so slight it humbles even modern engineers. The ratio between the base perimeter and the height when multiplied approximates 2p. The ratio between the slant edge and the height nearly equals phi, the golden ratio. No one knows whether the ancient Egyptians knew these formulas, but one thing is certain: stone does not lie. And the stones here speak of a sacred logic, a place where geometry meets theology, where mass meets spirit. Inside, the corridors are designed in ways no one fully understands. The chambers are positioned with inclines, depths, and dimensions that defy explanation. There is a king's chamber empty. There is a queen's chamber, but no queen ever lay there. There are air shafts that point directly to stars in the Orion constellation, believed by the ancient Egyptians to be the pathway for the souls of pharaohs to return to Ra, the sun god. And thus the pyramid ceases to be a tomb. It becomes a cosmic device, a soul conversion machine lifting the dead from the earthly realm through the starlight back to the source of the first light. Each block of stone weighing tons is fitted tightly together without cement. Thousands of years have passed, yet it has not shifted, not collapsed. It has not been eroded by wind and sand. This structure defies both earthquakes and time. And that proves one thing: the Egyptians did not build to last within life. They built to last beyond it. There is nothing purely technical about the pyramid, because here engineering has become religion. Construction was a ritual. Stone was a spell. The way the Egyptians arranged those massive blocks was not a show of force, but a declaration. If the world may fall, at least this place will not. And indeed, for over 400-500 years, the pyramid has stood still. While ancient Greece rose and fell, while Rome crumbled, while dynasties came and went, Giza remained, unchanged, waiting for no one, like a petrified heartbeat in the heart of the desert. That is why early travelers called it the lighthouse of the soul, not because it shines, but because it never goes dark. And perhaps what makes it magnificent is not its opulence, but its radiant silence. Today, people measure the pyramid with drones, scan it in 3D, analyze every grain of its stone. But they still cannot explain it fully, because what they are trying to understand is not a building. It is an idea crystallized in geometry, a dream that humankind, though made of mortal flesh, could leave behind an imprint that defies time. The Great Pyramid does not need to tell a story. It is the story. A story with no main character because the one inside is gone. A story with no climax because its very existence is the peak. A story that needs no ending because it continues to write itself with the gaze of every visitor who stands before it. They call it the greatest tomb in the world. It is believed to be the resting place of Pharaoh Khufu, the king who dedicated his entire life to constructing a stone machine for immortality. For centuries, people have traced its corridors, measured its angles, calculated its depths, searched for hidden doors, decoded every slab of stone. And yet, after all of it, no one was inside. No mummy, no golden sarcophagus, no funerary objects, no incense, no sacred inscriptions. Only a single empty stone coffer resting in the so-called king's chamber without a lid, without any sign that it ever held a body. It is not a room. It is a void so profound it unsettles the mind. Could it be that the pyramid, the pinnacle of ancient architecture, the symbol of authority of death by design, was never completed. Could it be that Khufu, the man who built a tomb for himself, never entered it? Or perhaps he was buried there and then robbed. But if so, where are the thieves? Why are there no signs of forced entry? Why are all the chambers intact? Why is the entire structure so utterly silent, as if it itself refuses to be discovered? Archaeologists debate. Scholars theorize. But the deeper they explore, the more corridors they uncover. One truth repeats itself. No one ever finds the king, and so people are forced to reconsider. Perhaps that emptiness is not a failure. Perhaps it is the message. Because maybe the pyramid was never built to hold a person, but to contain a fear. The fear of being forgotten. The fear that once the body decays and the name dissolves into wind, nothing will remain. And so a great tomb had to be built, not to preserve a corpse, but to preserve an idea. That is the tragedy. A tomb without the dead. A crypt with no soul. A colossal effort, absurd in its scale, just to fill a void no one dares to name. The Great Pyramid is not where someone lies. It is where someone once feared, and feared so deeply he built an entire mountain of stone to conceal that emptiness. Perhaps Khufu did not die there. Perhaps he died mid-journey. Perhaps he died before fulfilling his dream. Or perhaps he never intended to lie there at all. Perhaps he only wanted the world to believe he was there. And in that belief, he would become immortal, not in flesh, but in eternal doubt. Because sometimes, the thing that lasts longest is the thing no one is certain of. Like a poem with no final stanza. A song that ends on an unresolved note. A gaze left unanswered. Giza is the perfect crack in the illusion of immortality. It exists not because of what it contains, but because of the void it cannot fill. And it is precisely that void that keeps it forever alive. There are monuments born to serve a dynasty, structures raised for a god, a king, an era. But one day, all of that fades. Gods are renamed kings, our forgotten empires are erased from the flow of time. And what remains exposed to wind and sand is a shape. That shape bears the name the Great Pyramid of Giza, no longer belonging to Khufu, no longer belonging to Egypt, no longer belonging to an ancient religion. It has become part of the face of humanity. No one walks past Giza without lifting their gaze. Whether ancient Greek philosophers, Arab merchants, Roman soldiers, Christian monks, European explorers, or modern tourists with headphones, all stop. Because there stands a mountain of stone, man-made, but unlike anything humans have ever built. Giza does not shout, "Remember me." Giza simply stands, and for that, it is never forgotten. Writers call it a dream turned to stone. Architects call it the pinnacle of stillness. Physicists measure gravitational force between its blocks. Mystics see the eye of Ra planetary maps, cosmic energy lines. Right or wrong, superstition or science, it all proves one thing. No one can look at the pyramid without seeing something of themselves in it, because it does not reflect a single face. It reflects the human essence, the yearning to rise, the fear of being forgotten, and the illusion of immortality. It is what we dare not say, but always feel. Not an answer, but a question with no end. That is why the Great Pyramid has become a universal language. Asians see in it the balance of yin and yang. Europeans see logic. Americans see resilience. Africans see ancestral memory. Modern minds see the loneliness of a structure no one understands anymore. And strangely, the less we understand, the more we respect it. The more it resists explanation, the more we want to return to look again. The pyramid is no longer a sacred site. It has become a tourist destination. Yet among thousands of selfies in every pair of eyes, lifted from the sand, there remains a flicker of something primal awe and confusion. Why is it still there? Why did the ancients do this? And why, when we look at it, do we feel our own fear of being lost? When humanity reached the moon, it left behind a flag. When Khufu faced death, he left behind a pyramid. A flag can be worn by wind. A pyramid cannot. It does not tell us what to believe. It only tells us, I was here. And that is enough. In a digital age, where information vanishes in seconds, fame is measured in views, and loneliness hides behind screens. The pyramid is a block of silence that cannot be scrolled past. It cannot be added to a cart. It cannot be closed with a tab. It forces us to be still. And when we are still, we begin to remember who we are. Not Egyptians, not pharaohs, just humans. Small creatures who once built something not for themselves, but for the very idea of existence. Standing before the Pyramid of Giza, one may speak endlessly of engineering, of mathematics, of ancient astronomy, of physics, and labor of power and glory. But in the end, there remains something faint, vague, and silent that cannot be named. The sensation of staring into time turned to stone. Not time measured by seconds, but the time of consciousness. The time when humankind first realized it would die. And from that moment onward, humanity began to build. The pyramid was not built in months or years. It is the crystallization of a fear that stretches the length of history. The fear that one day this body will decay. The fear that this voice will be forgotten. The fear that the world will move on, but we will not. And to overcome that fear, humans did not meditate. They hauled stone. They stacked layers. They carved into rock the very shape of their obsession, tall, sharp, silent, and left it standing in the wind for thousands of years. Giza is not Khufu's tomb. It is not a temple to Ra. It is not a monument to power. It is the tomb of time. A place where time does not flow. A place where one moment a longing for immortality was frozen in stone and now watches humanity through every passing age. The Romans came and left. The Arabs came and lived. The French came and measured. The British came and claimed. The modern world came and took photographs. But the pyramid did not shift, did not change shape, did not crumble. Instead, the more still it stands, the more we see ourselves change. Because its immovability becomes the clearest mirror of our fragility, and in that it silences us, in a noisy world that is its greatest power. Perhaps you came here just to travel. But then as you stand beneath a structure nearly 150 meters tall, about 490 feet, with stones larger than a truck placed by hand in the middle of the desert, you will realize you are not small. You are part of a long chain of those who once looked up, those who loved beauty, who feared death, who wanted to leave their names somewhere and then realized they no longer needed to, because to look up is enough. The Great Pyramid does not need anyone to remember Khufu. It does not need anyone to glorify ancient Egypt. It only needs to stand like an eternal low note, like a heartbeat of stone in a changing world. And because of that, it transcends all religions, all nations, all ages. In the heart of the desert, as the wind brushes each step, no voice is heard. But if you close your eyes, you may hear. I was once built to remind you that humans are not meant to be forgotten, not by fame, not by war, not by brilliance, but by silence, steadfastness, and shape. One day, all things will fade. The internet, the cities, the modern monuments, all may vanish. But if that pyramid still stands, then it is no longer a monument of the ancients. It is the final imprint of an eternal dream, a dream that began in sand and remained in sand.